Hi, I'm Corinna Hogan. I was a composer for Composing in the Wilderness 2017. I was living in Texas and still am at the time. Um, and the piece I wrote was called Look Up. The, the whole trip kind of inspired it. It was a trip of a lot of firsts for me. I was 18 years old and it was my first time taking a plane ride, which I went without my parents. It was my first trip ever without my parents. It was There was a lot of new stuff that happened. And one of the new things we did that I had never really done before was hiking. We did a lot of hiking on that trip. Um, and so that was a really exciting discovery for me, is that I loved hiking so much. And I'd been to Alaska before. In fact, I'd lived there for 3 years when I was about 12, 13 years old. Um, and I was seeing stuff that I had seen before, but in a very new way. I was experiencing Alaska in a very different way than I had before. Um, and so when I wrote the music, I was thinking a lot about hiking because that was just such an important and interesting experience for me. And something I noticed a lot while I was hiking is that after a while, you'd start, even though you're in the middle of all this crazy, beautiful trees and animals and plants and lots of wildflowers, you could kind of get in a rut to where you were just walking and trying not to fall over. So you'd be staring at the ground a lot, which, it's good to keep your balance, but after a while it'd be like, man, I'm in the middle of Denali National Park and I've just been staring at the ground for like 30 minutes straight. So I had to keep reminding myself to, hey, look up. You don't just walk, through Denali and experience what you're surrounded by. So periodically I'd have to tell myself, hey, look up. And anytime I would look up, you'd be surrounded by, sometimes we were in places where you could turn 360 degrees and all you saw was mountains. If you were on a peak, you could see the mountain range and it felt like every direction. One time I stopped and looked up and there were wildflowers as far as I could see on either side of me. I'd never seen that many in my whole life. It was just an incredible experience. And I kept having to remind myself to look up and see that, because if you're just staring at rocks, it doesn't seem that exciting. But anytime you looked up, it was just incredible. So when I started writing the music, that was the biggest inspiration for me, was the combination of hiking and the things that you saw when you finally looked up from the ground. And the concept of the piece was pretty simple. I basically had two main components, that one represented hiking and one represented the pausing and looking up and seeing everything. So the hiking was represented by this rhythmic figure that starts off in the snare drum and it moves around to the different instruments of the song, goes to the cello, then to the flute, then back to the snare drum. So each time it comes around, it's slightly different, but it's still this interweaving rhythm that kind of ties the whole piece together. And then I'd have moments where that would stop and it would just be these big grand gestures of melody and lots of flute lines and less rhythmically focused material. And that would be more my pausing and going, wow, this place is cool. So that was really the main concept behind the song. I wrote it in 3 days. I probably finished it up on a fourth day. And I know there was one night I stayed up till like 4 a.m. finishing touches on stuff, but most of it was written in 3 days. And yeah, that was it really. It wasn't a very complicated concept for me, but I was so pleased with the results. It's been how many years? It's been, I guess, almost 4 years at this point, about 3.5 years. And it's still one of my favorite pieces that I've written. It was such a wonderful experience. And I was just really happy that I felt like it accurately represented what I was trying to portray. And yeah, it was a wonderful experience. And I really want to go do it again sometime.
Hello, I'm Susan Campbell, and I have lived in Fairbanks, Alaska for the past 30 years. I'm an artist and a poet, and I was privileged to be part of composing in the wilderness as an artist, responding to Corinna's wonderful music. Her piece, Look Up, I loved the enthusiasm in the work. I loved the rhythmic nature of it, the patterning. Part of our collaboration before we started was correspondence via email that Corinna sent an email describing what she just told you, her experience in Denali, the wonder of it, the majesty of it, how she looked around. I've been fortunate to be able to spend quite a bit of time in wilderness areas in Denali and many other places in Alaska, and lots of time hiking and being outdoors. And so responding to Corinna's music, bringing my personal experience of the natural landscape to what I heard in her music was really a wonderful adventure in creativity. So I created an artist book. It's a flitch book, meaning it's made with 4 panels of birch with things sewn on them. And all of the things sewn on my panels were objects that you could find in Denali, but none of them were collected there. They were collected in other places in the interior. But I responded to Corinna's, the pattern in her music, that when you are out in the wild world, that you see things, and sometimes when you stop and look closely, what comes to you as a viewer, what fills you, the majesty of looking, and then the minuscule insight that you see. And I tried to bring that into this artist book with the pattern of spruce seeds or porcupine quills, stones arranged, seed pods arranged, so that as a viewer that you might look at it as you listen to her music and see, even in a small way, this new way of seeing something that might seem very common, like spruce seeds, but then you look at them and the shape of them, the texture of them, just like the shape and texture of that music that makes you feel something inside by seeing it in a new way. And that was a great challenge for me as a book artist, to bring this emotional feeling about the music to this visual artwork. And I've tried to do that by arranging natural objects in a way for you as a viewer to look at it and see and feel the wonder and the surprise of what is here in wild Alaska, and especially Denali. It's an amazing place. So I was very grateful to share this experience with Corinna, her music inspiring me to give shape to something I feel in a visual form, this artist book.
Hello, my name is Margo Class. I also live in the interior Alaska in Fairbanks, and I've been here for about 16 years now. My art medium is found objects that I might find on a beach, in the forest, in a junk shop, a flea market. All of those things have great interest to me. And I work with them both in artist books and in box constructions. For this project, I chose to do a series of 3 box constructions arranged in a triptych, a 3-part notation, if you will, commenting on Corinna's wonderful piece, Look Up. And I too have had a lot of experience in Denali National Park, serving there as artist in residence several years ago. And curiously enough, my focus at that time was space. And there's no better place to study space than in Denali, for all the reasons Corinna brought up. That was really splendid, the way she brought that together. And when I listened to Corinna's piece and looked at the score carefully on paper, I saw a narrative arc, and it had 3 major parts. And the first part was exactly what she talked about, the getting used to hiking and the kind of marching along and getting one's balance and so forth. And then the second part becomes a little bit more lyrical, where one gets comfortable in the hiking rhythm and looking around a little bit more. But it's that third part where the lyricism goes really up into the stratosphere that my piece tries to hit upon. And if you look at the three-part series that I produced, each one has a ladder fabricated from sticks that come from the boreal forest. And each one goes up into the stratosphere, into a certain kind of realm of thinking. And this is really reflecting my experience, a personal experience of hiking along. It's almost a goal of mine to get beyond the looking around into the realm of thinking about ideas. And so the ideas I'm referencing in the upper parts, the upper registers of my pieces, would be on the left, how things work, how things operate together mechanically or intersectionally. And then the second part is more about that space element that I mentioned, where almost anything goes. And often in my work, a sphere or anything round indicates a larger cosmos of thinking. And then the third little register in the upper area features a chair. And this represents in my work often solitude and contemplation and meditation. And so very often walking down a trail, in the forest, wherever I am, and I try to do that daily in my life, that's where I find a contemplation. So that kind of is the backstory of the piece of art that I did in response to Corinna's wonderful work. Thank you.
Well, I'm wondering, Corinna, if like we made this artwork and you never saw it or knew what we were doing until it was done. Like so then what it was like for you. I mean, I'm wondering just as a viewer or listener, like what was your response to seeing these two pieces of artwork?
I very much want to ask a little bit about your process and how, like, you know, because for me, it's so, I can understand making a piece of music off of something you see, just in that you have something like concrete that you're looking at, and then you're making something more abstract. So it's really interesting for me to think of hearing a piece of music, which is just an inherently a little more abstract art form, because if you have anything that's supposed to be literal, it's still representation rather than having an actual thing you're seeing, and then having to take that and make something like a concrete visual thing you can hold and see. So that's just interesting to me. I don't even know how you would approach doing that.
You know, Corinna, that's exactly what we do. I mean, you nailed it. We take this abstraction and make it into a different abstraction, although more definitely tangible and visual. And that was our challenge. And that was the challenge that was new to all of the elements, I think. I don't think anyone had responded that specifically to music, although Mary B had a little experience in that regard. But you provided the grist for the mill in really important ways for us.
I agree. I am not a musician. And so to come at this, I learned to listen to your piece in a way I had not consciously listened before. And that was really an adventure for me to do that. And it was a challenge at first, because how do you take something that is an abstraction or create some evocative feeling and make a visual concrete thing? And so that was a challenge. And I think I was drawn just my own sensitivities or the ways I love to hold stones or hold sticks and hold things and notice them, that just my desire and my connection to those things, that was, right in the forefront of my choice to use those as materials. But it was a challenge as to be a non-musician and to respond to the music from an emotional point of view. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting that Susan's and my works, juxtaposed as they are in the exhibition and in the catalog, really reflect very different and yet compatible responses to being in Denali or the natural world anywhere. And it was a surprise, I think, to us that when we finally saw what each other did, that we found this synchronicity and yet a very individual response. And as we both know, we all know, we did not collaborate between the artists. It was simply art, music to you, Corinna, not to artist. And that made a difference.
It did. And then there was the surprise of the wholeness of it at the end. Now there are two pieces of artwork with this piece of music, and those three things together have a wholeness. And it's a wonderful feeling to have been part of this with Margo and with Corinna, and to have brought this to life in this new way. So I know Margo feels like this, and now listening to Corinna, I think we are all very grateful for this experience and the challenge of it and the adventure of it.
Absolutely. And I was so excited about this before I ever saw your guys' art, because, whether it's music, visual art, a movie, something, like, I have very strong connections to art, and I know like how much time I've spent kind of thinking and about these things, and like you get a lot of value out of them. So just the idea that somebody was going to spend that kind of time on something I'd written, and not just spend time thinking about it, but like manifest those thoughts in a new piece of art, like that was so exciting for me. And I didn't know what kind of art to expect. I wasn't sure what kind of thing you guys were going to do, but I'm not a visual artist. I haven't studied art, so I was thinking like a painting or something, and getting something that was so not what I expected in the best way possible was incredibly exciting. And it's funny, obviously the rhythmic component and the like emotional elements of the piece are the two main things, but I guess in my head, I always, like, when I hear my own piece, I lean more in the direction of thinking about the big grand gestures and emotion of it. And so, like, if I were to have made a piece of art based on my music, it probably would have been, I don't know, a little more leaning in that direction. I don't even know how to put that into words, but it was so cool, like, really feeling the rhythm in what I saw in your pieces of art. It was fascinating and really exciting, and I love hearing you guys talk about them. It's something I absolutely could not have made myself, or would have even thought to have made myself, but it came from something I made. So it's been such an exciting experience. It was exciting then, and it's just as exciting to me now, so many years later. It's been such a great, interesting thing, and I love seeing just the like collaborative thoughts over these pieces of art and my music. I'm just babbling at this point. It's so exciting.
And one of the things that's really neat that does bring the wholeness that Susan referenced is the exhibition, where the work and the music is accessible simultaneously through the QR code, and then having the score there for any musician. The score it lends an element that is really important and goes beyond either of those other elements. But then for the visual artist, oftentimes, I think among the elements group anyway, that looking at the score and seeing the notes on the page, and oftentimes the notation of what those notes were referencing, like babbling brooks and flowing rivers and that sort of thing. That was also a huge influence that I don't think any of us had had the opportunity to work with before. So the exhibition brings it all together.
Yeah, and I was so excited. So before COVID happened, it was sometime last fall, the exhibition came to Stephen of Austin, which is where I was going to school, and it's where Steve, I guess I can't call him Dr. Elias now, teaches. And so I'd only seen the pictures for a couple of years, and getting to see that in person was just even more exciting. It was so, even just on the little things like, oh, it was smaller than I was anticipating it being. And just, I don't know, being able to be there with it and see it 3D, it's so exciting. And I'm really want to go see it again at some point. I know it'll be traveling for a while, so I'm going to find a way to go to it again.